And I'd like to read the whole section before we continue. Subhuti, if a bodhisattva gave in his practice of dana all the 7 treasures in quantities sufficient to fill worlds as many as sand grains in the Ganges, and another man comprehended that all dhammas were egoless and thereby achieved perfection of patience, zanti, the latter's merit would surpass that of the former. Next page. Why, Subhuti, all bodhisattvas do not receive reward for their merits? Subhuti asked the Buddha, World Honor One, why do bodhisattvas not receive reward for the merits? Subhuti, bodhisattvas should have no longing and no attachment when they practice meritorious virtues. Therefore, they do not receive a reward. And this is a chapter with the meanings clear. This chapter means that if there are bodhisattvas who make offerings, dana, that means give. Dana means give. Bodhisattva is always giving instead of receiving, always helping, always be compassionate, rendering compassion to the whole world, to all sentient beings. That's a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is on his way to Buddhahood. So bodhisattva has 10 realms to achieve. But right now, you are also a bodhisattva if you are practicing the bodhisattva's way. You are a beginner bodhisattva. But there's so many levels in practicing the bodhisattva's way. If you are a real, true, authentic bodhisattvas and you give, in the process of giving, you realize that all dhammas are selfless. In other words, you do not attach to the giving. You do not attach to the compensation from the giving. In other words, for example, you make donations, you won't think that, oh, so many people would respect me, so many people will give me a reputation, they will respect me for my deeds. A bodhisattva would not attach to the deeds, would not attach to what is being given, because in his mind, all dhammas are selfless, does not have any self-nature. All dhammas arise from causes, and that the nature of causes is empty. Everything arises because of causes, and every cause is empty. That being empty, they are without a self. And that among causes, nothing arises, nothing passes away, because they're completely without a self. They're completely without an ego. Put it another way. We, sentient beings, temporal beings, ordinary beings, we think that we have an ego. We have an ego to satisfy. We want to satisfy that ego, and that ego is always having insatiable desires. But the bodhisattva is egoless, because he does not consider everything has a self. If you consider you yourself has a self, and everything has a self, you're considering a self entity, which is not right, because every entity arises based on causes. Causes arise, then there is a formation of such thing. Everything comes from causality. And each cause is empty. What do I mean by empty? It is impermanent. It comes together without a real self. It's just all causes come together to make it come true. And you do not attach to it. Once you attach to the ego, you can't let go of the ego, you are in suffering. Because we, just to take an example as the body, as an individual, if I think that I have an ego, I won't be happy. I will suffer because of my attachment to ego. Because I would like to protect my ego would raise me up, and my ego wants reputation, fame, fortune, respect. And if I can't get that, I'm going to go out of the way to get them because that's my ego. And that the problem comes with the ego. A bodhisattva is egoless. Not just himself with ego, nobody has an ego. So he won't attach to anything. And we just remember, we just recite, we just chant the Heart Sutra. We just chant the Heart Sutra. It says here, form is no different than emptiness, and emptiness is no different than form. Form is just matter. In other words, matter is no different from emptiness. You think every matter is matter, but that matter is formed because of different causes. That matter itself does not have an entity. So matter is no different than emptiness. It comes together, yes, it exists, yes, but it exists on a conglomeration of causes only, and it does not have its real ego. But we think we have an ego. That's the problem. Problem comes from ego. Suffering comes from ego. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. That means matter is emptiness. Don't treat matter as matter. Don't treat matter as an ego. And emptiness is form. In emptiness arises all forms. Form is empty, but form is empty because it's all causes put together to have that form. But emptiness is form. In other words, emptiness accommodates all forms. The more you get rid of your ego, the more your intelligence would widen. I think that you really have to think about it before you can understand it. Because we are being raised up with an ego. You yourself, your family background, society, everybody, except for the sages, except for the enlightened people. The same is true not just with form. Form is matter. Matter is just molecules and neutrons and protons. But how about the spirituality? It says the same is true. That means it's also empty. What others? Perception, conception, volition, and consciousness. The mind, the spirituality of it, is also empty, not just the form. What is made up of the whole world? It's either matter, it's either material or spiritual, right? If we can categorize it, everything, if we can categorize it for the sake of speaking about it, everything inclusive would be under these two categories. It's either material or spiritual, or material, or it's either body or mind. What are you made up of? It's either the body or the mind, both. The body we know, how about the mind? The mind is not just the brain, not just the gray matter. The mind is the perception, the conception, the volition, and consciousness. You see, Buddhism is not about blind worshipping. It's about your mind, about your perception, about your volition, about your consciousness. Nothing about blind faith. You've mistaken it if you think that Buddhism is just believing in God. No. You are superstitious. You believe in something that you don't even understand. You just, I want an explanation. What creates the world? It must be someone. That must be God. You put a very simple answer to a complicated question. It's easy to understand. You tell a kindergarten, what makes the world? God. Simple to answer. It's not that simple. The whole world comes together because of causality. Combination of material and spiritual. We have to analyze it bit by bit. We have to understand it, not just take it for granted. We have to understand why, how, where, when. That's Buddhism. That's what Buddhism is all about. That's what the Buddha found 2,600 years ago. He didn't find a master and servant relationship. I'm the master and you're the servant. I'm the master and you're the follower. You believe me? No, not that. He found a way where belief itself is exposed to everybody, where there's enlightenment, where there's wisdom, where you gain from knowing the wisdom, where you can liberate yourself from suffering by understanding. It is only through understanding you create your world, not through ignorance, not through blind faith, not just mere belief will make you be successful. I believe I'm successful and I will be successful. You got to work through it though. Yes, you got to have that belief, but you have to work at it. Section 29. Subhuddhi, if someone says the Tathagata comes or goes, sits or lies, he does not understand what I mean. Why? Because the Tathagata has neither whence to come nor whither to go. In other words, the Tathagata has not come, the Tathagata has not gone. That is why he is called the Tathagata. For those who don't understand what Tathagata is, the Buddha has 10 names. The Buddha has 10 epithets. In other words, the Buddha is not just called a Buddha. The Buddha has 10 different names, and one of the 10 different names is Tathagata. That is a Sanskrit word, and the Chinese translated it as "thus coming." In other words, a Buddha coming to the world, getting a full enlightenment, and introduce that method of enlightenment to all sentient beings to help them to liberate themselves from suffering. That's how the Chinese translate Tathagata, coming to the world. But that translation is just a translation. It's just a notion, a conception. That translation itself is a misnomer. It's not the right. It does not convey the right meaning. Yes, the Buddha has come. The Buddha has gone. But the Buddha has not come. The Buddha has not gone. Why? Historically, the Buddha has come, and historically, the Buddha has gone. In the history of civilization, in the history of mankind, there was a Buddha 2,600 years ago in India. He was born as a prince, and he became a monk, and later became enlightened. And then, what's the significance of being enlightened? Another question for beginners. Why do I have to get enlightened? What happened to me when I get enlightened? When I get enlightened, the basic understanding is I don't have any more suffering. No more life and death. No more greediness. No more jealousy. No more depression. No more killing. No more stealing. No more lying. One purity. None of those bad deeds exist anymore. No more quarreling, no more fighting, no more wars. Cold wars, hot wars. No more weapons, no more bombing, no more starvation, no more earthquake. The other day, or yesterday, there was an earthquake in Chile. It's 8.8 on the Richter scale, and 100 people reported dead. Remember, we just chanted the 8 realizations, and I can repeat that to you. There's a first realization that we chanted, and that's what the Buddha said. What did the Buddha say? I'm quoting this to you. We just chanted this. The first realization is that the world is impermanent. The earth is unsafe and fragile. That's what the Buddha said. Some people may not believe it. I'm safe. I'm safe at home. I'm okay. I'm healthy. Today you are. Tomorrow we don't know. The Buddha said the earth is unsafe and fragile. It's impermanent. Not just the earth. Your body is impermanent. My body is impermanent. And yesterday there was an earthquake, 8.8 on the Richter scale in Chile, which is even more serious than in Haiti. And There's also a speculation that a tsunami would come to the Pacific Rim. BC is okay, they told me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Because 8 o'clock, there was an alarm in Hawaii warning everybody that there could be a tsunami. I don't know if they had one. Maybe they haven't got one now. Otherwise, we would have heard about it. So the tsunami is attacking Hawaii. Imagine the last tsunami in Southeast Asia. Thousands of people get killed. They were on the beach playing merrily, enjoying their life. People from all over the world, families, sipping their Coke and barbecuing and on the grill. And all of a sudden this tsunami comes, overwhelm everybody, the trees, the houses. Many people died. The earth is unsafe and fragile. And that's what the Buddha said. We know it, but we never have that training to think about it. We still are longing, insatiable desires for wealth, reputations. We may hurt others in the process of achieving it. When you come to think of it, why? Why do you do that? So, Thanagatha, let's get back to section 29. I switched my thinking to impermanence because I was thinking of this tsunami and earthquake. Right now, we have an opportunity that we're healthy. We're in the human realm. There's 6 realms of reincarnation. There's some sentient beings who are unfortunate, who were reborn in other realms, animals realms, ghost realms. But in this life, we are fortunate that we're in the human realm, although our fates are different. Some may be poor, some rich, some healthy, some unhealthy, some suffer a miserable life and some enjoy a joyous life. Everybody is different because every karma is different. Don't blame God for it. You did it yourself. You brought your own karma to this world. Your body is your own karmic force bringing you here. And right now, we're so lucky that we're still healthy. But we don't know tomorrow. And the Buddha said, it's too late when you know at the juncture of death. It will be too late. If you haven't learned about the Buddha's teaching, or you don't care about it, you've just spent your 30 years or 40 years, depending on how old you are, 50 years before, in what? How did you spend your time? You spend your time in struggling. We spend our time in struggling. When you are young, when you're a teenager, you work, you toil yourself, you suffer in families quarrels, in pressurized in jobs. And is that what you want for the whole life? If you don't even know what the Buddha is talking about, you lose the opportunity to inject that wisdom in your mind according to the Buddhist teaching. Try to research more into what did the Buddha say about life. How do I get benefit by the Buddha's saying? How do I liberate myself from all this suffering? This physical suffering, metaphysical suffering. The Buddha said we can all liberate ourselves from these sufferings. And he make it so loud. How come I didn't listen? I lend deaf ears to all these things, and I go on my insatiable desires of looking for wealth, reputation, and money and whatnot. Are you right? Am I right? Were we right? Think about that way. This is your first step to enlightenment. Today you heard about it. You heard about, yes, I can liberate myself from suffering. I've got to learn it. Not too late. If you know at the juncture of death, it's too late. Too late. Because you need time to train yourself. You need time to purify your karma. You need time to learn the Buddha's teaching. So it's always good to start learning when you are young. Teach your youngsters, your son, your children. They should know about this, the way to wisdom. Not just about struggling in your job, getting your estate's fair share from your relatives who passed away, struggling for money. I've seen people who were struggling for what they think is equitable share of what they should have from estates of previous ancestors. They spend years in lawsuits. What are they doing? All kinds of suffering in this world. Have you come to analyze them, understand them? Anyway, in this section 29, the Tathagata comes and goes, sits or lies, it does not understand what I mean. If you think that the Buddha has come and the Buddha has gone, you are only looking at the physical Buddha. There's a saying by a Zen master, I think his name is Tao Chen, and he said, we mold the clay, we design the fabric, we mix the color, we carve the wood, we make a statue, and we gild it with gold, make a good Buddha statue. If you think that the Buddha really looks like that, the goddess of compassion would die from laughter. You think the Buddha looks like this? This is how I make the Buddha. The Buddha looks like this. I make it out. That's just a physical Buddha for the sake of understanding. If the Buddha is still physical like that, that's not the real Buddha. So the Buddha has not come. Anything that has come, anything that has gone, anybody who has come, anybody who has gone, only comes physically and goes physically. Don't look at the Buddha with physical eyes. The Buddha has not come. The Buddha has not gone. Because the Buddha is beyond physical. The Buddha is suchness. The Buddha is the nominant of it. If the Buddha is only physical, it's not worth believing. It's not physical. The physical only brings out your non-physical. How do you understand, get access to the non-physical side? You've got to train yourself. One of this training is meditation, because you're looking inward for it. You're not looking outward for it. All greedy, all people who are greedy, they're looking outward for wealth, for reputation, looking outward. When would they look inwards? Would you get happiness from looking outwards? You will only get happiness from looking inwards. So, it says here, if someone says the Tathagata comes and goes, sits or lies, he does not understand. He only understands the physical part. Why? Because the Tathagata has neither come and neither gone. That's why he's called Buddha. You have to understand it through spirituality, through the deeper understanding, not just from ignorance. Then you really have to go deeper. Next, section 30. Subhuti, if a virtuous man or woman reduced to dust all the worlds in the universe, would those particles of dust be many? Subhuti said, many, World Honored One. Why? Because if they really existed, the Buddha would not say they were particles of dust. And why? Because when the Buddha speaks of particles of dust, they are not, but are expediently called particles of dust. It sounds paradoxical when you look at it. But it isn't. It's not paradoxical. Now, the Buddha said, visualize virtuous men and women, that if you are reduced to dust, in other words, visualize everybody here. We have a body, but our body is reduced to dust. Now, a matter can be reduced to dust by machines. You know, there's a piece of wood, and you use whatever machine you have, you can reduce it to to small particles to dust, but we visualize our body to be just dust in the universe. Would it be many, many dust? Of course. If everybody here, men and women, reduced to dust by visualization, would there be many, many dust? Yes. But the Buddha said, dust is matter. All matter is empty. All matter depends on causes. Don't believe that matter really exists. It exists because of causes, and is empty. It does not have an ego. But it has to be called dust. If we don't call dust, how do we understand? It is not, but then it is. Is paradoxical? No, it's not paradoxical. It's just a way of understanding it. So I've come to page 27, and I haven't finished section 30. If you have any questions, I heard the bell goes, ding dong, the bell goes. And if you have any questions that you don't understand, you can always, at lunchtime, write on a piece of paper, and then we'll attempt to answer those questions. Talking about tsunami and earthquake, there's a few concepts that I can offer to the first-time comers that you can think about if you only come once and you don't return again. There's a few things you have to think about. The first, nothing is permanent. Everything is impermanence. Don't attach. You have to let go of everything you attach to. If you attach to hatred, let go of the hatred. If you attach to greediness, let go of greediness. If you attach to a history that is miserable, let go of that. No more depression. Let go. Nothing is permanent. Think about impermanence. That's the first that I can offer to you. The concept of impermanence. What's the second? Suffering. This is a world of suffering. Whether you believe it or not, whether you think that it's negative thought or positive thought, it's a fact. Everywhere it is suffering. It is a fact. You cannot deny that fact. If you're denying that fact, you're like an ostrich who buries his head into the sand and thinks that the hunter can't get you because you can't see the hunters. Everywhere it is suffering. How do we liberate ourselves from suffering? That's what the Buddha said. Are you not trying to find out more about it? Or you just go on your everyday chores, your everyday rigmarole, and you waste your time, and your time is up, then you're dead, you're gone. And you roll on to the next karmic individuality, the next body. That may not be a more fortunate body than this one. So think about the suffering. Third, think about emptiness. This emptiness does not mean nothing. Emptiness has a very profound meaning. In the Sanskrit language, it's sunyata. S-U-N-Y-A-T-A, sunyata. Sunyata is a very profound philosophy. It's not just empty. The common English word is empty. But you think about it, emptiness. Nothing has its own nature. What is the fourth? There's no ego. What that ego means? Ego means the controller. You think you have a controller in you? No. If you have a controller in you, you can control your life. You can say, I don't want to be sick. Then you're not sick, but you cannot control that. If you are sick, you cannot say, I don't want to be sick. No. If you have to die, you cannot say, I don't want to die. No, you cannot. You are not your own controller. You cannot control your life. Why? You've got to find out.